Welcome to my volumetric billboarding tutorial for the Blender game engine. In this tutorial we're going to be learning how to display generated 3D textures. It will be the basis for my future volumetric tutorials. So the first thing we're going to need to do is first we want to change the material. So we can either click here to add shader nodes to the material, or we can come down to the nodes tab, which I already have open, and then click use nodes. So the first thing you're going to notice is the material goes black. That's because there's no material. So we could choose a material for the floor, but no, we don't even need the floor, so let's get rid of that. And we don't need the material either, so let's just get rid of the material tab with the X key. Okay, so now the first thing we're going to need is to go into the cycles render mode to access the texture tab. So we're going to get a Veroni texture, and we're also going to get ourselves a gradient texture. And then we're done with the cycles, so we're going to go back to the game mode. And already we can link the color up to the output. And hey, look, already we have a working Veroni generated texture inside the game engine, which that's really pretty cool by itself. But we can link up the alpha. Oh, the factor and the color are the same. I'll just link them up. The color. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna need to do is go to the render pipeline options. Click transparency. So that our material will be transparent. Alright, cool. So we're already halfway there. We almost have a volumetric texture. Almost. Pretty cool. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the back of this cube, remove it, and then we're going to select our new face, and then so what we're going to do is be making our billboard now. So we're going to rebuild our cube out of slices or billboard faces that will face the camera. So what we're going to do, we're going to to lock it to the y-axis, and then 0.2, and then we're going to do Control R until we've rebuilt this cube, like that. And then, alright, cool. So our cube is now set up, and then so the next thing we're going to want to do is get it to track with the camera. So we're going to go in here, add an always sensor. For an actuator, we're going to choose edit object, track to, link them up, and we're going to choose camera. So now when we press play, it's probably going to go clear. Yep. So that's because the y-axis is facing the wrong way. See, you can see it if you're looking in the other direction. So what we're going to do to fix that is choose the track axis to -y. But it depends on how your cube is set up. So there we go. Now it's working. So you're going to notice there's a few things that are still wrong. One, there's like a small line artifact there. So it's strange. So we can easily fix that. We need to go into the game settings tab, and then under alpha blend, we're gonna go from opaque to alpha sort. And so what that's gonna do is use a different algorithm to calculate which faces are first and which ones are after. So that's fixed, but it's also it's pointing at us, but we need to select this 3D option so that it'll point at us in 3 dimensions rather than just 2. So there we go. Now the billboard part is set up. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move the cursor to the cube. I'm going to add an empty and then scale it up a bit just so it's easier for me to select. So select the camera, shift click the empty, and then control P to parent to object. So now the camera is parented to the empty, so we just want to choose the empty by itself. We're going to add a mouse movement sensor, and we're going to link that up with a mouse lookout actuator. So now when we move around the mouse is gonna orbit around our object. So we're also gonna add some more cubes just for visual reference points, because it kind of doesn't make sense without being able to see what's happening around it. So let's add some of them in now with a. We're going to use a Shift Z to lock. Yeah, so now you can see what's happening. So it's always billboarding to the camera. That's what we want, but the texture is locked also to the camera. So we're going to fix that next. So we're going to go back to the node editor. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to add an input geometry, and we'll connect the global vector up to the murano texture vector. And now when we run it already works. Now there's still a few things we're gonna have to fix, but you can see that if you look inside, they're rotating. It already looks pretty cool. So one of the problems is when we move this cube in 3D space, the texture is going to move in global space rather than in object space. So to fix that, we're going to add some vector transforms. So if we add a weld to an object vector, and when we move it in 3D space, it's going to be locked out. I'll show you, bypass it just to show you what I mean. See, when you move it through the 3D space, it's going to move with the thing. So this means when we move it through the 3D space, it's going to get the local space of the object. So now while that works, it's when we orbit around, it still doesn't work right. So I found to fix this one last issue, I need to add a second vector transform. So I add a second vector transform, and I'm going to set that from object to world. And I also need to check it from point to vector. So now when we pan around, it's going to rotate with the object, but when we move it in 3D space, it's locked to the object. So I'm not sure why that combination specifically works. If anyone wants to let me know, just comment in the sections. But so the next stage was we're gonna add a gradient sphere around our object. So using our the vector information from the first vector transform. We're going to connect that up to our gradient texture. We don't need the second vector transform for this. So here's our output. You see it's like a line because we got linear selective. We need to go to spherical. So you can see now we have this 3D sphere, a nice gradient sphere that we can use. So that works nicely. Alright, and then the next stage was we're gonna make that a little harder in the center. And then we try to make the edges a bit softer as well. So with the use of power and multiply, we can get a nice gradient happening. Just play around with the values a bit. You can see the fall off on the edges is soft, but it's hard in the center, which is what we want. And next thing we're going to do, we're going to add a color mix RGB, and we're going to connect that up with the alpha line for our murano texture. And we're going to move the color down to color 2, and color 1 we're going to set to black, which will be transparent for alpha. And then we're going to use the output from the power node from our gradient texture as the factor. So it'll mix, wherever there's white, it'll mix color 2, and wherever there's black, it's going to be transparent. So now we have our Murano orb already. So we can just adjust some of the multiply values a little. Power, we just want to make it a little bit softer and softer on the outer edges and harder in the middle. Okay, so let's check it out. And then there you have it. So if you want to add some color, we're gonna add a converter color ramp. Drop that into the color line of the Murano, and we choose the white tab on the right, and we can add in a few colors if we want to. So let's add some red in the middle, and then we have it's like a fiery plasma 3D Murano texture. Alright, so we can also even bring in another texture. We can use any of these or most of them. So say for example a wave, we connect the wave up in place of the Murano texture, and then we're gonna connect the vectors, and now so it's a bit dense, so let's lower the scale of the wave texture to something like 1, and then there you have it. You got a wave 3D texture now. So thanks for following this tutorial so far, and a lot of this technique can be applied to a lot of the different tutorials I'll be making in the future, like the fire ones. Maybe I'll make a tutorial on the warp core plasma tube thing. We'll see how we go, but yeah, it would be a good idea to play around with this node setup. If you're not familiar with nodes, just take your time, connect it up the same way I have it, and yeah, play around. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial.